Hello, in this lecture we will create governmental financial statements. Governmental financial statements for the projects fund. We will be creating a statement of revenue, expenditure, and changes in fund balance, as well as a balance sheet. Last time we generated this data through entering this information into the journal entries here and creating the trial balance with it. We're going to take this information from the trial balance, which as we can see is in balance by the fact that the debits minus the credits equals 0, and put that information into the format of the financial statements, starting with the statement of revenues, expenditures, and changes in fund balance. The statement similar to an income statement representing the timing of the performance or timing over a certain time period, either a month or a year, in this case, the year. We're going to be taking that information, the timing data being the dark blue data, generally the timing data. So we're looking at that information. We're going to pick up first revenues, as is usually the case for an income statement type statement. And revenues will include sales taxes. Sales taxes, which we're just going to pull this 180,000 credit there, but of course, we are going to flip the sign because we don't want it represented as a credit. Therefore, I'm going to say instead of equals, negative of that number, that will put that number there and flip the sign to 180. Then we're going to have expenditures, not expenses, expenditures, and the expenditures are going to be the construction expenditures here. So I'm going to say construction expenditure. I'll just keep it construction in the expenditures area. We could also indent by going to the home tab, alignment and indent. Sales taxes, home tab, alignment and indent. The amount then will be for the expenditures equal to the contracts of 898, and there is that. Note that we have formatted it so it is underlined here in the home tab and underline. Then we will subtract those out, giving us the excess of expenditures over revenue. So it's kind of like net income, but of course we're going to be looking at, in this case, a term called excess of expenditures over revenue. Then we're going to say that that equals the 180 minus the 898. And that gives us the 718,000. Note that, of course, in this case, the expenditures are greater than the revenue. Now we'll have an item that's going to be a bit unusual in terms of a for-profit organization where we're going to have other financing sources. And those other financing sources are going to be the proceeds for the bonds. So normally when we sell bonds in terms of a for-profit organization, we wouldn't have the proceeds in the revenue section. We'd be showing the interest portion in the revenue section. And here we're showing the flow, the cash flows here in the revenue in the temporary account. So we're going to call this bonds proceeds, or proceeds of bonds. There we have that. That's going to be equal to this 800,000. However, we want it to be a positive number. Therefore, we're going to flip the sign by putting, instead of an equal sign, a negative of that number and enter, flipping it to a positive number. Then we're going to subtract those out. I'm going to put an underline under here. I'm going to go to the home tab, font, underline, and we'll subtract those numbers out, giving us the excess of revenue and other financing sources over expenditures. Clearly the names aren't all that creative here, but they are specific. We have the excess of revenue, of course, and other financing sources over the expenditures. And we're going to take the last two numbers that we had, meaning we're going to take the excess of expenditures over revenue and the 800,000 here that we have from other financing sources, and in this case add them together because this is a negative plus this is a positive, and that'll give us a subtraction problem. 800 minus the 718 giving us the 82. We could clean this up a bit by indenting here, so I'm going to go to the proceeds from bonds, home tab, alignment, and increase the indentation, and then we can look into the fund balance. So we're going to include basically the fund balance, starting with the beginning fund balance and then ending with the ending fund balance. The beginning fund balance will be equal to 0. There is no beginning fund balance. We could say it's going to be equal to the sum of these items here. We'll take that and say we have 0. Then we're going to have fund balance at the end, or at December 31st. And that is going to be equal to the sum of the excess of revenue and other financing sources over expenditures and this 0 here, and that's going to give us the 82, which should equal, if we sum up all the temporary accounts or all the blue accounts, this 82,000. 82,000 here. We can then show an underline, home tab, font and underline, and then double underline here by going to the home tab, font, and double underline. Next statement that we will be creating will be the balance sheet. So we're going to have the balance sheet over here, and we're going to say that starting the balance sheet with, of course, assets. First items in the balance sheet, and the first item will be cash. Cash being our first asset. So there is the cash. We're going to pick up the amount, and I'm going to put it in the inner column and then sum it up in the outer column, even though there's only basically one number. And we're going to say, so the cash is going to equal to this 82. And you can see the cash is here. It's the 82. So there's our first number. Then we are going to pull that out to the outside, and I'm just going to call it total assets. Cash being the only asset is that 82. There we have that. Then we're going to have the next item, which will be the liabilities. We could also clean this up by indenting here. We can go to the home tab, alignment, and indent. Then we're going to have the liabilities and fund balance. Starting with the fund balance, so there are no liabilities here, so we're going to hold on at liabilities and fund balances. There are no liabilities in our trial balance, no orange accounts. Therefore, we are just going to have the fund balance accounts. So we're going to say fund balances, and that is going to be the same 82,000 if we highlight all the blue area, which we have here, the 82, which we also calculated here in the fund balances section of the statement of revenue, expenditures, and changes in fund balance. And of course, the assets minus the liabilities also equals that 82,000, which is the reason that we are in balance. So we're going to call that restricted capital projects. And that is going to be equal to, and again, we could sum it up again. Say we're going to say sum up these, all the blue. We can say all the blue items, and I want to flip the sign because we want to make it a positive number. So I'm going to put a negative in front of the S. So flipping the sign, and that will give us, and then let's indent it. Home tab, alignment, and indent. And that'll give us the total liabilities and fund balances. And I'm going to put that to the outer side here and say that's going to be equal to the 82. So there we have that. We have, of course, the total assets equaling the total liabilities and fund balance. Balance sheet is in balance. That is our statement of revenues, expenditures, changes in fund balance, and the balance sheet for the project's fund.